But in terms of time and money and energy, we know that we need to make a particular investment at this stage. But whether it's poker or business or life, the next line is more difficult. Because, of course, we don't know what is going to happen. We don't know if we're going to lose that money or whether we're going to win the pot. We make all these decisions under conditions of uncertainty. So let's explore uncertainty for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Not surprisingly, let's use the metaphor of poker, if you like. There are two main uncertainties in the game of poker. The first uncertainty, which I think has its corollary in the lives that we live, is our opponent's hole cards. What is it about the game right now that we can't see? If we could, it would be a completely unrecognisably different game. In fact, in many ways, the game of poker is just the assessment of what our opponent's hole cards could be. And I think this just represents the things about any given situation that we don't know or fully understand at any time. We might need more knowledge or information. For many people here, that might take the form of data. It might be traders need to know what's going on around the world in terms of current affairs. And we've always had this thirst for knowledge, I would argue. We've always had gossip over the back garden fence and a degree of interest in the world around us. Now, of course, that gossip has gone global with Twitter, and we desire to know as much as possible about the world. I think about 6 months ago in this country, we had an interesting court case which exposed this desire when someone stopped us from knowing something. Now, we might not have cared about the subject at hand, his sex life, but we objected to the fact that someone could stop us having access to this information. Google, I think, is a $150 billion monument to our desire to know more about the world. That's the first uncertainty that we're dealing with every day. The second uncertainty that we tend to relate to when we use that word uncertainty is, of course, the uncertain future. And this is represented in poker by the cards that are yet to come. And I think whether we work in the world of finance or not, we're always thinking about these uncertainties. In this country, we're obsessed with the weather and, again, exactly how our day will pan out. Right now, of course, financial uncertainties are affecting everyone. In which direction will those graphs go? How will this particular business deal or meeting go? These are the things that we're thinking about all the time. And, of course, in the last few years, uncertainties that we don't think about have been popularized. James mentioned them already, the black swans, the things that we didn't even know we didn't know. The things that we hadn't even considered might happen. That's kind of an example of a black swan affecting him, but I hope it's not a pure black swan, ladies and gentlemen, because I hope that he has taken some sort of mitigating or protective action to ameliorate the pains. That's more a black swan, ladies and gentlemen. That is completely from left field, and that's the kind of thing that we wouldn't even expect might happen. Actually, I think there's a whole other category of unknowns, uncertainties that we're thinking about at a subconscious level, not consciously in the forefront of our mind, doesn't dominate our every working day, but we're thinking about it, and it's of concern to everybody here in this room. It is, of course, the end game, the retirement. What will it look like? Will it be the idyll that we all imagine it to be? Will it make this journey somehow worthwhile? Or will the world look a completely different place by the time we get there? We don't know. And that's a massive point. How can we not know? How can all this uncertainty still dominate our lives? Because let's just go back a few hundred years now to a time when this guy gave us a toolbox that enabled us to predict with stunning accuracy the movement of the planets. He tamed the uncertainty of celestial bodies. And you could have been forgiven for thinking 400 years ago that by 2011 we would have tamed the uncertainty in all areas of our life. But we haven't. In fact, science went in completely different directions. 100 years ago, it started uncovering quantum mechanical realities that embedded the notion of uncertainty into the fabric of the universe that we live in. And 50 years ago, a meteorologist called Lorenz created this. It's the graphical representation of the butterfly effect. Because his strange attractor looks like the wings of the butterfly, the story that's always created to describe the butterfly effect is the notion that a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil will somehow, through a process of feedback, conspire to create a rainstorm in Reading. And you hear that and you think, I'm not quite sure how that works. And it's a shame that that's the sort of end of the story, because really what Lorenz was saying was something much more profound. What he was saying is, it's the confluence, the coming together of thousands, millions, potentially an infinite number of tiny events that we will never know, let alone control, that together conspire and feed back in on each other to create the big events that will impact and shape all our lives. Or to put it in an even more profound way, the big events that will impact and shape our lives, over which we will have profound opinions, are caused directly through a process of feedback by a series of tiny events which we will never know about, let alone control. We very rarely think about our lives in these terms, ladies and gentlemen. One of the few times that we do try and understand that is when something catastrophic happens. And actually, whether it's a catastrophe in the financial system or a mechanical failure like the Challenger spacecraft disaster, we spend millions of dollars trying to ascertain what it is, and it very often comes down to tiny little things that went wrong. The O-ring separating the fuel tank from the oxygen. 3 Mile Island was caused by the leak of a sum of water that would have fit into one glass. And in poker, we're used to this concept because we know that whilst he might have played very well to get there, and we know that theoretically over the course of a lifetime, his total wins and losses will be a function of how good a player he was, this tournament would have been won or lost on the turn of about 3 or 5 significant cards. In fact, his results will have had more to do with the length of the dealer's nails as he shuffled them together than all the things that he's learnt about poker for the last 20 years. And this is happening in the world around us all the time. Tiny things having huge impacts. If he, Mohamed Bouazizi, hadn't had his utensils stripped away from him and his face slapped in a Tunisian market stall in December last year, he wouldn't have set fire to himself. He wouldn't look like that. We wouldn't have seen that. And that part of the world might look completely different now and for the next 50 years. And what effect might that have on our lives here in this room? If Warren Buffett, world's richest man, had been able to operate his mobile phone, he would, he said at his shareholders' meeting in 2009, have received a message in September 2008 from Bob Diamond at Barclays offering him what he described as very favourable terms to come in and help bail out Lehman's, thus preventing the systemic panic that went throughout the world. We might not have seen that, we might not have seen that, and who knows how the world would look now if one man could have picked up the message from his phone. And we can go all the way back doing this throughout history, ladies and gentlemen. If the Armada had experienced a slightly different wind direction as it approached that coast, we, right now, would probably belong to that. On the plus side, our fans would look like that, our strike force would look like that, and we'd currently be the holders of that and that. So there are pros and cons to this, aren't there? I thank you. But I'm trying to depress you, ladies and gentlemen, because what I'm trying to say is that these forces are affecting our lives every single day, all around us. We live with it. So what's the effect of it? It's my belief that no presentation would be complete, ladies and gentlemen, without Maslow's pyramid of needs. So here it is, and right at the bottom, we can see our basic needs in life are, of course, our physiological needs. Food, water, warmth, safety, security, shelter, belonging, family, community. We need a sense of certainty. We need some sense that tomorrow will be like today, or at least we know roughly what is going to happen. Psychologists have done fascinating studies where they take 2 groups of people, A and B, and they give A quite strong electric shocks, and B, quite weak electric shocks. But they tell A when the shocks are about to happen, and B are kept in the dark. And they have both groups wired up for heart rate and sweat and all the rest of it, and it's fair to say neither group is particularly happy about the situation. But A is much happier, because we don't mind the shocks. What we mind is the uncertainty. And that's interesting because we live with this every single day. It's innate, it's endemic, it's part of our lives. So we must be doing some things to cope with this lack of certainty in our lives. And one of the things that we all do every single day is we predict. We feel like we're in control of our lives, and to a great extent we are, but we want to know what the future holds, and therefore we say what it does. And a study of history shows that people have gravitated towards those kind of people who have confidently predicted what the future might be, whether it was Nostradamus or astrologers. Bear in mind, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. We all make very rational decisions based on the predictions of these guys, even though they don't always get it right. And this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. This is the Bank of England's prediction as to what the UK economy would look like in 2008 from the perspective of late 2004. And I think the first thing we can see from this graph, ladies and gentlemen, is they've given themselves a bit of wriggle room, haven't they, there? And they're right to, because they know at the point of making this that they can't be certain about anything. All we can say roughly is that things might happen. And James was brilliant this morning when he was talking about a futurologist's job is to scenario plan, to ask what if this happens and what might we do in response to it. Because as Napoleon said, plans are usually useless, but time spent planning, now that's invaluable.